Well, good afternoon, and I want to welcome each of you for joining us today for our topic, which is families coping with dementia. And many times we've talked about this in different programs, and all of us would have to agree that this is one of those diagnoses that strikes fear in a family's heart, mind, and their soul. Of all the diagnoses that someone can receive, the only one that is known to create more anxiety than the diagnosis of dementia is that of cancer. And there would be people who would disagree with this and tell you they have higher anxiety with the thought of dementia than cancer. But cancer is known to be the #1 feared disease. When I always do research, I like to see what's currently happening and what's going on the internet and what are people doing in regards to evidence-based and best practices. The one thing I always find interesting is what's happening in regards to blogs. And I was going to take some time and read this to you, and I hope that you'll take a few minutes and look at blogs yourself. This blog happened to say, I personally get fed up with hearing all about his bowel movements or lack of them. I'm tired of hearing about diapers. I'm tired of every week or two him bringing out another treatment bottle or medication bottle saying he needs a refill. I have asked him not to eat in his bedroom as we live in a semi-rural area and we're prone to mice. He continues to eat in his bedroom. He hides cookies in his room so he can sneak food. This was one blog, and I want you to know it has had 12 responses when I first looked, and I think there's even more now. Go online, look at this blog, look at the responses, see the type of support that folks who are dealing with their loved ones at home, how they're helping one another. Every one of these responses won't be something you agree with, that's for sure, but many will give you some very unique ideas, and if nothing else, you surely won't feel alone. Here's another blog. It doesn't seem fair. My wife and I cannot go out to dinner, go on a vacation, or even go to friends because he will have a spell. When we were kids, our parents went out without taking us kids as long as it was for the adults. Now that we are adults, it seems like we are trapped. So again, I want to consider that you will be clicking on the link and seeing the responses because I don't want to just read those to you. I want you to kind of get a feel for all the responses and what people are sharing with one another. You're going to hear more about some of these common issues. One other, and we'll finish with this one, is like being put down with your siblings in the center of a nuclear reactor and being told, figure it out. And this happens to come from a book that we'll talk about in a few minutes, but this is pretty clear how people feel so frightened by this and so overwhelmed, being put down the center of a nuclear reactor. Most times when we talk in our training, we're talking about the care recipient or the person that has been diagnosed with dementia. Today, I want this to be different. I want this to be all about the family members that are affected by this disease, not the person who has the disease. And I want you to know we all are affected by this, and we're going to see in a few minutes it's not just the family members, it's also staff. It's the caregivers of the people with dementia. 1 or 2 generations ago, things looked a lot different. First of all, people didn't live as long. We know without antibiotics that many people died very early. Families didn't move as far away. They tended to be much closer geographically. And we also know that families tended to be much larger, so there were more people to share in the caregiving experience. There were no continuing care retirement centers. The word assisted living facility didn't even exist 1 or 2 generations ago. And the old folks' home was surely not called a skilled nursing facility. Interesting, when you go back in the literature, the word caregiving wasn't even used. It's very hard to find this word. And daughters were likely to be expected to be the one who would care for their aging parent. It was just a natural expectation. Where are we today? It's really different. Today's daughters are way less available for caregiving. And why is that? Well, the majority of the caregivers today are employed. These are about 40 to 46 years of age, employed women full-time who have to give up their jobs in order to provide caregiving. These women are starting their families later, a trend that started a number of years ago. We see more divorce, more single parents, way more untraditional households. And of course we know the geographic distance has increased as families have moved farther and farther away from their nuclear families. I don't want to forget to talk about sons, because we always used to see the woman as being the caregiver or the daughter. But today we're seeing more and more men that are providing direct care. And as a matter of fact, the statistics, most people will say it's 30%, but the very most recent articles that I was reading and that are the evidence-based protocols that people are using for training is it's up to 39%. So we're seeing a dramatic shift in men providing this type of care. We also can't forget, because we always think about children being the ones called to care, but we have to think about the spouses that are the caregivers. And one of my biggest concerns about this, we have to look at, and this isn't my biggest concern, but is the state of the marriage before the person was asked to call or called upon to provide this care. What is the state of the marriage? If there were problems in the marriage before, these may be just exacerbated. The other thing is, and I think this is the one that concerns me the very most that I see in the facilities where I work and consult, is the physical and mental ability to care. We so many times see somebody who's disabled caring for a family member who has dementia, or vice versa. And you see both people have limitations and they're providing care for one another. There's also so much that goes on with the parents' expectations of children. And I don't mean this just to mean that they're expecting more from their children, but there are many people who do not now want to be a burden on their children. They're very clear that they want not to live with their kids. They don't want their kids giving up their life. And so we have so much ambiguity in the feelings of needing care but not wanting to burden children. And then, of course, there is compensating for the one they love. The spouse that is not letting the children know what mom really needs or what dad is really needing, how hard it is on them at home. Because in many cases, the children may not even be in the same city. The only time they see them is at Thanksgiving or Christmas, and mom and dad aren't traveling any longer. And so one family member is taking care of the other, the spouse. And I will say this is very interesting because it's when one of the parents dies that this becomes most aware to the children. The children at this point become very aware that the mom was really having a lot more trouble and dad had been covering up for mom, or vice versa. When we talk about caregiving, it's going to be very important for both the families and professional caregivers to understand what is happening in the family dynamics. And as we go into these different issues that we're going to talk about today, we're really going to explore this. Before I go any further, I want to say we will never touch in 1 hour how complex this issue is. This truly is a course of study. This could be a degree in and of itself. But I want you to know that I feel it's so important we need to begin to open this dialogue. Family dynamics are so complex. So we begin to look at this and you do some reading. We've all talked about just birth order. What is the oldest child like? What is the youngest child like? We hear many times the older child had lots more responsibility put on them. The younger child was supposed to be the clown. One of the children will be the peacemaker. One was always fiscally responsible and one wasn't. So we look at the responsible one, again, the peacemaker, the black sheep. We sometimes forget the one who left home, who hasn't come back, that shows up later. Well, who was dad's favorite, mom's favorite? These are all dynamics that were going on in our household when we were children. And when things begin to get very complex, we begin to see changes in health, you're going to see these dynamics begin to rear themselves again. Why siblings disagree when it comes to issues about their parents. I absolutely love this picture. They do look like siblings. I have to tell you, this is only the beginning. Why do they disagree? What does mom need? Who's going to meet that need? There is so much literature on this that it is surprising to me, and wait till you read about it in the blogs. I call mom every Sunday, and she sounds fine to me. Is that the son or the daughter calling in where the other sibling lives within 10 minutes of mom, dealing every day with mom's issues, but when I call in, mom sounds fine to me? Why is that? Turns out that a lot of times the person calling in on the weekend or on Sundays or whenever does all the talking. Mom says, yes, dear, no, dear, yes, dear, no, dear. Wonderful to hear your voice, dear, but they're really not listening to the issues. Are you eating well, Mom? Oh, yes, dear. Everything going all right? Yes, dear. Except the sister or the brother who's dealing with the issue at home knows that they're getting 10 phone calls a day at work. They're spending, on approximation, 4 hours of time over at the house in the evenings taking care of all the issues. And one is trying to tell the one who lives closest there's no problem at home. The internal struggles, anxiety with the change of roles, this affects everyone. Think about the parents who now see their children taking charge. They've always been in control. They're having to give it up. Huge issues. Siblings having a change in their role. All of a sudden it may be the youngest or the peacemaker who's not able to make peace within the family. With young people or the children, we see a tremendous fear of our own mortality. Not that spouses don't suffer from this some, but it surely is exacerbated in the children when they see this happening to their parents. There are so many unresolved issues with our parents, and we'll talk about that in a little bit as well. But it's very hard if you felt that Mom didn't do things for you, that Mom did for your sister, to want to become the primary caregiver, or to be the one who's going to take responsibility. Children with internal struggles are now faced with parents who have a diagnosis with dementia who are not the same. And their continued need for encouragement from their parents, support from their parents, in some cases even financial support. They still need parents' advice. But most of all, what you're going to know and see is that they want their parents' approval. And now their parents may be so incapacitated that they're unable to do this for them anymore. So the internal struggles of these siblings and these children of parents diagnosed with dementia are many of the internal struggles that they had growing up within the home. They haven't changed significantly. The view that we have is if you live down the street or you live across the world from your parents, I want you to know that many of the feelings are the same by children. They think it's different for each one. Who's ever closer thinks they're in a better situation. If you live far away, the one who lives far away thinks the one who's down the street is in a better situation because they don't have as much guilt. I love this picture because it really signifies so many things. But I want you to know that when we look at different cultures, we've always thought that here in America, we didn't share the cultures of many Hispanic or people across the world that revered their elders. We think about it in the Orient, the reverence that is given to aging, and that we are the group of people who are not caring for our parents. It's amazing, as time is going on, you're beginning to see that this world is getting much smaller, and the problems are becoming much more universal. We're not seeing in all the cultures that used to care for their parents, that's still happening. So we're seeing major geographic changes and cultural changes in caring. One of the things I think is important is to recognize that all of us see things differently. We're never going to view our parents exactly the same. We're not viewing the situation the same. And this is true for all of us, whether caring for parents or any situation. But what do you do when you see things differently? I have to say, outside of an acute crisis where you're called in and everybody has to deal immediately, let's say it's just the beginning diagnosis of dementia. It's the first time it's been mentioned. You're always going to have one child, it seems, within a family that is in denial over this. Or it may be a parent, a spouse who's in denial. What can you do? Well, one thing is to give it time. You cannot push this. I want you to know if you have the opportunity, you're going to have to present this over and over. You're going to have many discussions in order to see things the same and to begin to come together to make decisions. Be patient. Give it more time. Don't expect everybody to react as you do immediately. I think it's very significant that you ask yourself and question your own emotions. Really begin to think about your own feelings. We're going to talk about a book in a few minutes that will guide you through this, and one that has really opened my eyes that I'll share some personal stories with you before we're done today. To be open to the perception of others, to really think about how is the other person seeing this, and I'm going to talk to you about that with brothers in a minute. But remember, looking through different glasses, just think about putting on a different pair of glasses and looking through somebody else's eyes for a moment. Getting a professional assessment in writing or results on a conference call when you see things differently than your siblings is imperative, because many times you may not come to an agreement at all. You will always think you're right. The issue here isn't just being right. The issue is doing what's right. And in order to do that, you may have to get some outside help. And there are people who do that. If you're not aware of who they are, you're always free to call us, 210, our area code first, 210-264-7000. But this might be a social worker, a geriatric psychologist or psychiatrist, and they also have case managers that are developing, and we're seeing more and more of these programs throughout the country that are actually dealing with aging, that bring people together for mediation and for understanding. So it's about education when you and your siblings can't see things the same. Now, and this is one that people don't think about a whole lot, but parents add to the confusion themselves and make our problems more difficult when we're trying to deal with our parents. I want to start out by telling you, number one, if your parent or your spouse is competent, they decide. They're in control. We are not going to make decisions for a competent person. As long as they are deemed that way, we have to respect that. And that can be very hard when we think we know what's right. But as long as they're competent, it's still their decision. What parents do is they sometimes pit one child against the other. In some cases, they know they're doing it, and in some cases, they don't. Mom tells me one thing, and mom tells my sister another thing. This is not unusual. And why do they do that? Well, I will tell you, in my case, I have had a mother who's since passed away, but my mother suffered from severe dementia. And my mother would share things with me she would never share with my sister. And then when my sister and I would get together, it was not the same story at all. And what I realized was she protected each of us differently. And she knew what I could handle as a nurse and what my sister couldn't, and things that my sister was better at than I was. But I can tell you, I don't think she was pitting us against each other. But have I watched parents do this? I absolutely have. Dad will tell me something that he doesn't want my brother to know, and then I'm put in the situation of keeping a secret. This is another thing that adds to the confusion of decision making and makes things so difficult. If your father is taking care of your mom and your mother has dementia, how difficult is this if you're now put in a situation of having to keep secrets? And how do we change families that have had your dad having you keep a secret for a lifetime? Because what's gone on in your family for the last 40 years isn't going to change with the diagnosis of dementia. These are some very ingrained behaviors. We as professionals many times get caught in the middle of this, and we try to change family dynamics. And whenever you study family, you understand that we are not, as professionals in nursing or as physicians or social workers, inclined to be able to change those dynamics at all. What we have to do is try to support a family system that's been working this way for years. Parents can be manipulative. We see this many times when they talk about they're going to die if. They talk about you may be responsible. One of the common things I was reading in the blogs is, you're going to miss me when I'm gone. You're going to feel sorry when I'm gone that you're doing this. And probably that parent has been doing that since you were a young girl. This is not probably a new behavior, but yet it's adding to an already very, very confusing situation as to what to do. We weren't prepared to deal for our parents with dementia. Nobody started teaching us this about 7th grade or 10th grade or any time during college. So what do we have to think about? One of the things is with that first diagnosis of dementia is advanced directives. Because although somebody has a diagnosis of dementia, if it's an early diagnosis, they are still capable of being able to provide insight to us of what they want us to do, how they want to be handled, what they would like from their children. And the biggest question that I get is, what is the right time to begin talking about advanced directives? Mine is as soon as possible. And it isn't going to be one time. Just like when I said at the very beginning, you have to give everybody time to think about what's going on. So there is no right time. But as soon as you can begin to talk with people about advanced directives in your family, and even among the siblings, this is very important. Remember, when people make advanced directives, these are not just about health care. It also can involve financial situations. And many times, children are hurt by who the parents selected. If you were the oldest son, you may think that your dad would immediately give you the financial power of attorney to be over all of the financials of the family. And if he takes the oldest daughter or the youngest daughter, you may feel actually hurt that you weren't selected. We tell families that one of the most important things they can do when they make advanced directives is to take time to explain the rationale to their children for their decisions. Many times children feel that one of the other siblings coerced their parents into this when they may not have done that at all. So we have to make sure that, number one, we're knowledgeable about advanced directives, we're getting help with these if we need it, that we understand why our parents made these decisions. And you'll see this as we go into a few case studies as we move forward. But advanced directives are a gift we give to our family. If you are a baby boomer right now and you're watching this and thinking about your parents' advanced directives, I'm going to ask you to stop and think about your own advanced directives for your children and making those plans right now and taking the initiative to do it yourself and go through it to see what it feels like. What would you do? It will help you to help your parents. Let's take a short case study. This is an 84-year-old mother of 3. She's been widowed for 3 years. She has a fall, fractures a hip, becomes disoriented after a long hospitalization that was filled with numerous complications. She's now unable to make informed decisions. Her oldest daughter has her medical power of attorney. Her son has her financial power of attorney. And the younger sister is prohibited by the older sister from visiting. This sounds like, oh my gosh, this is really complicated. This is actually a true case study that I worked with a family. I want you to think about the implications here. Here is a daughter who doesn't want one sister visiting, and this is what happened. She was making the medical decisions and decided to move her mother to a different facility, but the son held the financial responsibility and he refused to pay. He was not going to pay to put mother in a more expensive facility. And the older sister prohibiting the younger sister from visiting, how was the staff supposed to handle this? Where in these power of attorneys did it say that one of the sisters was prohibited from visiting? Who had the power of attorney over that? The sister with the medical power of attorney? Was this a medical issue or was this a social issue? And who got caught in the middle? Yes, the professional staff. Did we need help? Absolutely. I will tell you that in these situations, when it becomes so complex with families, you want to make sure that we're bringing all these folks, if possible, together at one time for discussions. And if not, at least that we're giving consistent information. And we have to find out why the older sister is prohibiting that visitation. These are so complex, and yet we're asking folks, how many of us have received training to deal with this? So we'll go back to it in a minute, but I want you to know these are very hard situations. So when we make these advanced directives, we have to be very clear about those. Yes, oh, how confusing. Yeah, how confusing. For both the families and the professionals who serve them. This is every day what we're dealing with. We have siblings who provide care, and sometimes they control too much. Usually, in most cases, you're going to see that there is one person who predominantly provides most of the care. It is not usually shared equally among 4 children or 2 even. You're going to see one person is providing more of the direct care. And this caregiver sometimes assumes that they know all and they know best. And in a book that we're going to bring up to you by Francine Russo in a few minutes, and you'll get to see, she gives a wonderful example of a caregiver who's going to share with her brother who's going to come over and fix a dinner. And the brother's going to fix chicken, and the daughter says, no, I have fish here. The brother says, I brought the chicken. She had chicken last night. And this becomes a big difference over fish or chicken. Once we're a sole caregiver and we think we know best, we have to learn to give up a little bit to get a little bit of help. Does it make any difference? That's got to be a question that we ask ourselves a lot in caregiving. Does this really make a difference? If somebody's suffering from dementia, they're probably not even going to remember they had chicken or fish the night before. The other thing is they're probably so grateful to have someone else with them to talk to. And the person who wants to be in control, why are you fighting these issues? Is it because you need to know best? Is it because when you go shopping, you're the only one who knows what mom needs, and so you're putting more on yourself? When we talked in the beginning about exploring your own feelings, every time you feel like you know best, you need to ask yourself why. The other question is it going to hurt mom or is it going to hurt dad? In any way, is this going to affect their quality of life? If not, maybe you need to help out a little bit and give a little bit more freedom to the sibling that's trying to help you. It's really hard to ask for help. And it's very interesting that people who care for a family member don't want to have to ask. And they say, if I have to ask, then you don't understand what I'm going through. Why should I have to ask my brother for help? Why should I have to ask my sister for help? They should know I need help. One of the first things I'm going to tell you is to make no assumptions because they don't know. And even if you think they know, I want you to put on that other pair of glasses and think about educating your siblings to why you need help and when you ask for it. Lots of times, this is a fear that when you ask, you're not going to receive and you don't want to be turned down. Again, don't make assumptions. You have to put it out there and you have to ask. What's really interesting as well is that when people do ask for help, they ask for it when they've reached a crisis point and they need the help right now and expect somebody to respond immediately. That's not always possible either. If somebody lives in Minnesota and you're in San Antonio and you need your brother to fly in this weekend, that may be a totally unrealistic expectation. Somebody around the street needs very clear guidelines of what kind of help do you need. Because it may be that your brother cannot handle your mom's incontinence. Your brother is not at all comfortable dealing with dementia, but he may be willing to mow the yard. He may be willing to take over the medication refills. Asking for help is very complex. Because also you're talking about the sibling and your order of birth or how things ran in your household, that you never asked for help. This may not have been real common, or you don't want to have to ask the brother who's never come through for help now, or you've always been so independent you don't want to look weak. Question yourself about all of your actions. This is an interesting question about being the only child. An only child will tell you everything is on me. And somebody who's dealing with problems with their siblings will say to that only child, you just don't know how lucky you are. You get to make all the decisions. There is no perfect situation. You're going to see there is no perfect family. There is no perfect caregiver. This comes up over and over, and one that I want to share with you that was personal to me as well. And this is the frustration when my brother visits. And it could be just as easily said, the frustration when my sister visits. But I want to think about reframing, and we did this once in a previous presentation, but I want to bring it up again, about reframing the situation. Here comes the brother who flies in for the weekend to see mom. He may go over to the assisted living, or he may come into your home, and we have him in this dark frame because he comes in and he is going to tell people in the facility what he wants. He's going to tell you what you're doing wrong. He's going to give you all of the best advice because he knows all. You've been dealing with your mother. You're picking up her laundry in the evening. You're bringing her in her favorite food because she can't stand the food in the facility. You're running yourself ragged, and here comes the golden boy. Look at this frame around this man. He is the golden boy. Mother says, I'm so glad you're here, dear. I've missed you so much, John. You are so dear to come and visit me. Oh, how I love having you here. But did she say that to the daughter the day before when the daughter came in with all the laundry that was pressed, was putting it away in the drawers, who brought the new Depends, who picked up the perfume that Mom wanted or the special dusting powder? Did she say, I love having you here, dear. It's wonderful? No. Why? Why do parents do that? Why does the mom make over the son? I want you to put this in a different frame and understand that the golden boy may be being made such a big deal about him by Mom because she's so afraid that he isn't going to come back. She hasn't seen him in so long that what she wants to do is make it a perfect day so he will come again. And she knows that you've been there. You're coming. She does appreciate you. But does she tell you all the time? She's not afraid you're not coming back in. So if you put a different frame for the mother who hasn't seen the child, who's feeling very insecure, maybe you'll think differently about Golden Boy. Maybe not. This is the book I've been talking about. It's called They're Your Parents Too, How Siblings Can Survive Their Parents' Aging Without Driving Each Other Crazy. And the author of this book is Francine Russo, and I very seldom suggest that you read a book. But I want to tell you, whether you're a professional caregiver or whether you are a child, and I want to tell you, even before you're dealing with this kind of crisis, I can't suggest a book more. And I don't get any royalties from the book, so please don't take that. But I want you to know this is one that touches on almost every issue that you can imagine with siblings and their parents. If you are the primary caregiver, don't assume it has to be just you. What is the worst thing that will happen if another sibling steps in, or you choose a facility or a caretaker to come in and help you? What is the worst thing that you are expecting to happen? I think a huge situation comes for caregivers is when they start thinking that they're providing the happiness or they're making their parent happy. Because what you don't want to confuse is good care with happiness. We cannot be responsible for another human being's happiness. If your mother was not a happy woman when you were a young girl or when you got married or when you had your children, if she's always been kind of morose or always angry at the world, you are not going to make her happy. But can you provide good care? Can you make sure that she's receiving good care? We make mistakes when we feel we are responsible for the happiness of another person. Another thing that's really important if you're the primary caregiver is not to underestimate what you're getting from the caretaking. When you read some of these blogs, you're going to feel and sense how many people are a primary caregiver that are getting such positive rewards from what they're doing. You'll hear this over and over and over again about the positive things that come out of caretaking. Yes, they're tired. Yes, they wish they had more help. But the good that they're feeling many times overcomes all the negative that's involved in caregiving. So I don't want to make this all about the bad part because there are tremendous parts. There's also some things that happen. We see people who are martyrs in caregiving, but they must be getting something from that as well. And if we're self-reflective and we work with a counselor, many times we can identify some other aspects of our life that need some work. I'm not going to spend time today talking to you about exercising, getting massage, taking time for yourself. That's in a whole program about caregiver stress. What I want to talk to you about today is about what happens within families. Those childhood hooks. Those things that our parents could always get us with, or our siblings could always get us with, that now we're an adult, supposedly emancipated, that are still hooking us back, and that we see as professional caregivers just when people come in to visit their parents. If your sibling is the primary caregiver, you are still expected to assist. Yes, it might be money, It might be financial support that you can provide to assist. It might be that you fly in or you make sure that you're giving breaks. And if you can't provide the break yourself, are you hiring a paid caregiver, or can you find people from the church so that your sister or brother is not responsible for doing that looking? Emotional support. I can't say enough about this. For whoever is providing the care, whether it's a sibling or your parent, they want to be told they're doing a good job. They want to be able to complain, and you need to be able to listen, to allow people to vent without giving advice. Sometimes it's better just to listen than to try to fix. I can't say that enough. To try to listen, don't try to fix. And above all is education about the disease process and caregiving. And it's interesting that when people are in the middle of caregiving and you want them to read a book, they want to kill you because they don't have time to read the book. So read it for your spouse. Read it because we have many spouses who have problems with each other while one's taking care of one's parent. Try to be so understanding and so knowledgeable that you can be supportive, because the person who's involved in the primary caregiving is probably overwhelmed and not ready to be a student. So that's really important. I love this picture. It's called The Haunted House, because no matter what, when we go back to our childhood, there's some things that are still haunting most of us. And in this haunted house are all the things that happened to us as a kid, from the other people in the house, from our parents. I even think about, and the haunted house is kind of like the house next door always looked like Beaver Cleaver's house. Our house looked like this, and their house always looked better. Somebody else's mother cooked better or treated them better or let them have more freedom. But we're dealing with tons of issues that go back to our childhood. And they start arising again as we begin to face crisis and caregiving. I have some notes here, and so let me take these for a minute. I want to tell you again, if you have questions or comments, click on the Ask bubble in the upper left-hand corner, and we'll be glad to answer your question. And if I don't have the answers today, I'll try to get them for you. Here's a question. I have a family caregiver who fights constantly with her brother and sister. The brother, as guardian of the mother, has mom put into a long-term care facility. The caregiver, as conservator, took mom out and moved in with mom. Now the caregiver is angry, resentful, and miserable to the point of a personality disorder because no one helps. The younger sister came to visit this summer and began cleaning house. The caregiver needed it done, but saw it as an invasion. She doesn't seem to ever see any positives to the caregiving, but refuses to see help as positive. How can I, as a family caregiver, help her to see the positives instead of dwelling on all the negatives? Great question. I want to tell you that, first of all, it is something about when somebody else comes in to try to fix things. Many times what the caregiver would prefer is someone to sit down and listen to them about all the problems, to be able to vent. There are so many syndromes here, and unless I had more information about this family, I don't think I have a ton of advice about this particular situation. But what I can tell you is that when you read this Francine Rousseau's book, you're going to see this is very, very common. But over and above all is, why did the person want to be the primary caregiver? Why did they take it on? And what are the roles of each person in that family? And this may take a lot more time than this family will have to give one another, especially if they don't live closely together. But for the one who came in and tried to clean the house and fix, the question would have been to ask, I think, and to help them to communicate better, what is the one thing that I can do while I'm here to help you the most? And maybe it wasn't cleaning house. Maybe it was something else. I don't know. If you'd like to call me and discuss the case more, I'd be delighted to do that, and surely to give you some other ideas, and also to point out some areas if you don't have time to read the whole book, because I really enjoy doing that. So again, 210-264-7000. You'll see my email at the end as well, and I'm going to encourage you to please contact me. I don't have your email address here. Another question was, you spoke about parents adding to the confusion. Do you have any advice for those of us who come from small families who have a manipulative parent? Should the family members talk with the parent together? I think the first thing is you all need to make sure you're talking to each other and you're all on the same sheet of music before you go to talk with the parent. And when you do, it has to be in a very supportive manner for the parent to help them to help you, asking for their advice, asking for them to assist you, not confronting them with being manipulative, but helping them to clarify things for you. And I think the idea of going in together as a group and not as an intervention, that's the worst case scenario, not as an attack, but going in and asking for help is one solution there. One other question before we move on is I've tried to broach the subject about advanced directives for my mother. It's not well received, usual. No one wants to talk about it, and one of my brothers gets very upset. Is there anything I can do as the only one who knows the importance of advanced directives? One issue is to make sure that you have had discussions with the physician at the reticence of the family to discuss these advanced directives. The other question is to get with your siblings and see if you all are on the same page anyway, because if the family parents are not going to deal with these advanced directives, in my case, we had that same situation. My parents were not going to have advanced directives. But it turned out that all four of the siblings had the same view on how we would handle things, so we didn't need to push my parents for those. And when the very end came, even though we have as much dysfunction in my family as there are in any families, and I come from one of those haunted houses and has its own issues, I can tell you that that was one thing the kids came together and did especially well. Please contact me and we can talk about these issues more. They're big questions. There are fly-in family members. When you're a fly-in family member, let me tell you, the one thing you want to come with and fly in your baggage is support and not criticism. If I could give you one piece of advice, leave the criticism at home and pack the support. The other thing is the effect on the staff, because I want you to know you're leaving your loved one in the facility and you're going home, and if you create a mammoth amount of problems and you're just seeing something for 10 minutes, talk with the family member who's there that's dealing with it day to day. If they need support and you need to meet with the team, that's very important. But I will tell you not to come in as the heavy and start upsetting the apple cart and then flying back out on that plane. And more than anything else, I encourage people to think about what you're asking for is what effect does it have on the caregiver that you're leaving behind. If you're visiting your mom or your dad in an assisted living or a skilled nursing facility and they have dementia, is it going to change your parents' quality of life, or is this about you, or is this about your parent? Because many times we're going to see this is about the person who's flying in, and we'll talk in a minute about guilt. No two children have the same parents. I think I've shown this picture before, but I want to tell you that when my mother was dying, my mother had dementia, we made all those end-of-life decisions. The children were having other issues between ourselves that had to do with all those things back from our haunted house. 4 of us in a house with a mother dying in the room. Next to us, we're having a discussion. And a social worker and a pastor came in to talk with us from hospice. And the one piece of advice he said to us that stuck with us and has changed our family completely was, he said, you know, the 4 of you ought to stop and just each introduce one another to your mother, because the 4 of you had a different mother. And not only that, but the 4 of you had a mother that you wished you'd had that you didn't have, certain qualities that you wished your mom had. So you had the mom you wished you had, and each of you had a different mother. And it is so funny, but to this day, I think we're closer than ever because of that, because I'll say my mother or my father, that was not my mom or dad. And we've come to really respect that. And I think it's very important. And if you can take that tack, put that frame on the picture, and by the way, that's not my father. That was somebody who was a guest at the assisted living who was Ben Franklin. But I love the idea of introducing my mother to my sister and vice versa, and we've had that with all 4 of the siblings there. There are no 2 families that are the same. If you're going to try to take one of these examples and apply it to another family, it isn't going to work because there are so many other issues, but you can get so many ideas. Big families, small families, close families, distant families, We're all trying to cope with some of the same issues. Sharing information with the entire family is something I really do encourage, that when there is a conference for the parent, they're doing a service or a care plan, why not ask for a conference call and have people at a distance hearing the same thing? There should be some rules of engagement. If you happen to be the person who's running the care plan or the service plan, that only one person talks at a time, that the staff is given enough opportunity to present what they have to share, that each family member will be given an opportunity to share as well. And if there are major differences, that they will be referred to for some mediation and help with the family if we can't come to an agreement. But I will tell you, it helps if everybody can hear the information at the same time from the person who is sharing the information. Everybody at the same time. And there's no reason today that conference calls can't be set up. Ask for them if it's from a facility. We won't have a lot of time to go into case studies, but I want to give you one that's very common. It's about chemotherapy or dialysis. Somebody who at late stages is facing some major decisions. Usually it's a parent, but not always. But let's say that it's one parent who is making decisions about chemotherapy or dialysis, and one daughter is advising mom to go ahead and go for it and fight mom, and the other daughter is coming in behind and saying, Mom, you don't have to do this. This is your decision. You don't have to listen to Susie. This is all yours. And I want you to understand that when we take these kind of problems to our parents, they are trying to please us. They're trying also to help us deal with their own mortality. They're having all their own issues, but they're also trying to assist us. I want to take you back and ask you to remember to think about who you're caring for. Is this about you, or is this about your parent or your sibling, or who it's about? So remember, when we talk about these different situations, who's at the heart of this issue, and why are you asking someone to stay on or to give up? Most of us aren't asking that. But I think that if we feel so strongly in our emotions, we need to consider, is it that we've not made our amends, that we need our parent there longer? Can we talk about that but still give this person while they have the ability themselves and not pit them between us as children? Financial issues will drive families farther apart than anything else. I want you to know it's very expensive to provide care. When somebody is left a house by dad, and the dad has promised, and this is one that was given in the book as well, that the fishing resort or the cabin was given to the son. And the son had taken a $20,000 loan from dad. He hadn't paid back. And the daughter is now the financier. She's the one that has the financial power of attorney. And she says to the younger brother, I need the $20,000 back to keep Dad in the assisted living facility. You have to pay it back. You're going to have to sell the cabin. You're going to have to sell it in order to help us to do this. And this, for this young man, may have been the only thing that Dad ever gave him that he needed from his father. It was the love. Everything else, maybe he'd never heard from his dad, I love you. There are so many issues associated with finances. This is so complex. And in some cases, we will not be able to rectify those. I'm going to go on to a few things here because we're getting close to the end, but I want to talk about guilt, and more guilt. Guilt is not limited to those that are caring for a loved one at home. Guilt is found by many people who have placed folks in assisted livings or in skilled nursing. They have more guilt in some cases than the ones who keep them at home. There is guilt by your brother who lives 100 miles away or 5,000 miles away. There is guilt by the family who's caring for the family member at home, who feels they're not doing enough or they're losing their temper. Again, we have to be understanding and listen and allow people to share. I know if she can't help it, but I can't take it anymore. And when somebody shares those words, they feel guilty. I can't take it anymore. I should be able to take it. Guilt does not serve any process, but I want to tell you that we have to help our siblings and our parents with that emotion and give them freedom to be able to talk and try to deflect some of that. There are times when you won't be able to come to answers and you're going to have to look for guardianship for your parent. You're going to have to look outside your family, and there will have to be a court-appointed guardian in some cases because of the conflict or because there may not be anyone there that's capable of doing this. Adult Protective Services are, again, this is an organization that can help you as well. If you feel that you have a parent who is being abused by one of your siblings, that they're taking advantage of them financially or not providing enough care, you can call Adult Protective Services, but you need to know they're not going to come back and share a lot of information with you. There are different reactions to dementia, and I have to tell you, among siblings and even among our parents, when one of them is diagnosed with this, some people will feel that Dad is still here, and they want to relate, and even though they don't know who you are, they know that Dad is still there, and there is emotion, and your father and his soul is there. And there will be others that will feel Dad is not here anymore. This is now just a shell. Every one of us is trying to cope. Every one of us is trying to make sense out of it. So we have to respect each other's reactions to dementia and know what mine is may not be yours. Hopefully we'll come together in this in some way through education, but I have to tell you, until we cure this disease, and we're not close, until we cure this disease, we're going to have these different reactions to dementia. I had a child one time who told me that you are only as sick as your secrets. And I think if I leave you with nothing else today, I think this may be the most important thing that I can share, whether you are a spouse providing care, whether you're a professional caregiver, whether you are a sibling. All of us are grieving when someone has dementia. We're grieving the loss of a parent or a spouse. We are scared and we are anxious about death. And we also have this guilt about voicing the most unacceptable of feelings, and that is, I wish he would go ahead and die. I wish he now could just die. And most of us are not comfortable sharing those words, but most of us have thought that. When you're dealing with this and it has gone on for years, or even if it's short and you don't see quality of life for your parent or your siblings or whatever, to be able to say the unacceptable feeling, they would be better off dead. I want you to know, until we as professionals allow people to voice these feelings, we don't have to agree and say, yeah, they'd be better dead. That's not what we're asking. We're saying to affirm this is, you are surely not the only person who's ever had that feeling. Or I can understand how you might feel that way. Just allowing people to voice the unacceptable feeling, that sick secret that they think is so wrong, will give people the opportunity many times to move forward, to not feel so alone, and not to end feeling in any way they precipitated death by their thoughts. We know that is not rational, but one way to do that is to affirm that they are not alone in those feelings, that many other people have shared that with us. Most of us that have worked in the field for a long time are very assured that many people feel this way and have expressed that. Thank you so much for joining us today. We look forward to seeing you again.